That speaks to something I wanted to get to you at some point in our conversation. There are lots of conventions about orchestral music. There's a box that I think most of us put it in. Some would just call it classical. Is that the correct term? Do you like the term?
No.
How do you feel about it?
Well, there's just music is so diverse. I mean, there are so many eras of music. I mean, when people think of classical music, they kind of go back to the period of time of, Haydn and Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, and, Chikovsky, the Eastern European music that, came to America through the immigrants that brought it and that kind of thing. So that's when they think of classical music. But, Bernstein's classical, but, there's also Bernstein wrote West Side Story. You know what I'm saying? And there are, so many like Latin composers that got short shrift, like Manuel de Falla and even Revueltas and Marquez, these contemporary composers. And there's a whole, and music, a new music. And kind of, if you think about also George Gershwin, I mean, George Gershwin's incredible music. He wrote shows. He wrote the first American opera, Porgy and Bess, basically, Rhapsody in Blue. And American in Paris and the Concerto in F are two phenomenal classical pieces, but they contain within them elements of jazz and blues and different things like that. And I must say that, Black composers that write classical music have been overlooked over the years, and now there's a resurgence in that. And I just did a concert, and it was really interesting for me because I picked 5 pieces of music, and I come to find out later, every one of them had a relationship to Rochester that I didn't know about. This composer, Adolphus Hailstork, we did this fanfare of his, and he was born in Rochester. Then we did a piece by the composer Okoye, and it's from an opera about Harriet Tubman. And Harriet Tubman didn't live far from Rochester, and the Underground Railroad went right through Rochester. Okay. Then we did a piece by William Grant Still, who actually became a protege of Howard Hanson. Howard Hanson is a great American composer who was also the dean of the Eastman School of Music. And he wrote this Afro-American symphony. And it was programmed in 1934 with the Rochester Philharmonic premiering that piece in the Eastman Theater in 1934. Incredible. Second half, a new young composer, James Lee. Well, compared to me, he's young. He's in his 40s. Incredible composer. And he wrote Freedom's Genuine Dawn. And this was a piece for narrator and orchestra. And it's a Frederick Douglass speech. One of his speech was, the speech about the 4th of July. What does that mean to us, And he set it to music. It was an incredible piece of music. It was only written in the last 3 years. And so that comes under the umbrella of classical music, And our final piece was Duke Ellington wrote a ballet called The River. And it is really a brilliant piece of music, and it's written for orchestra. So there's a whole genre of music that is actually classical music, but it is anything but the music of the 18 and 1900s, if you know what I mean. So there's that box, there's classical, then there's popular. I mean, the orchestras, they sell these boxes, subscribe to our classical series, subscribe to our pop series. But sometimes in the pop series, I'm doing what's known as classical music. And sometimes on the classical series, we're doing Duke Ellington jazz. So to me, there are no boxes.
Precisely. And I think doing an examination of your career and your background and the type of music you've made and who you've worked with, it's clear that you like to break that box, that you kind of want to throw it up against the wall.
Sure. Yes.
There's a lot of preconceptions that orchestral music or classical music, that it's a white genre, that it is sort of that it's an upper crust genre, and I and your effort and your careers, your choices, it seems like you're like, hey, why can't I like work with like Leslie Odom Jr. or Winona Judd? You know, like just like that there's more. How common is that perspective? And why do you make that choice?
Because I made it from the beginning. I am like, we're all humans. You go back 4.1 billion years, we're all from the same matter. You go back 5 million years, we're all from the same genome that started. You know what I'm saying? So I don't like labels and boxes. I think it's exclusatory. I don't, if that's a word, I hope it is. I made it up, you know.
It is now.
Yeah. I don't like, you know, these fences and boxes and rules. And, you know, normally in a classical concert, the only time you applaud is at the end of the whole piece, right? So in this concert I was telling you about, the concert with the Black composer music, there were, let's see, if you break up all of the pieces into movements, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There were 17 different elements, right? The audience applauded after every single one that night. Everything, we broke the barriers down. It's like, you feel, you love this music, you want to applaud, bring it on. You want to be engaged in this concert, bring it on, you know? So I don't like the boxes. I just want people to come in and experience something in an honest, emotional way and react to it the same way, and not like, oh, it's the etiquette is you can only do this and you can only do that. You know, I mean, there are times when there are amazing ethereal moments happening where you prefer somebody doesn't yell out to break the spell, you know, which is funny because I read this thing on the internet. There was a concert in Los Angeles recently, and I forget what piece they were playing, some Ravel or something. And at this moment in the piece, this woman sighed so loud in the room. It was kind of like, I mean, it was an amazing thing to hear this sound of the human at this one moment in the room, and like the whole audience, you know. But yeah, I don't, you know, I don't, even though I went to a conservatory, I don't really come from the restrictive, you know, sort of background of classical musicians who are taught a certain way, and certain, this etiquette is expected. I mean, you know, of course we want to have respect and not interfering with concerts in a stupid way, but I mean, if the audience wants to give you back something, applause or energy, you know, I love it. I love it. I think it makes it more meaningful for everybody who comes. And I want people to come and just be comfortable, enjoy themselves, get something out of the concert, be touched. And, you know, I mean, I think the musicians love it too. You know, I noticed the RPO the night of that concert. Actually, we did 2 different nights. Audience after every tune was applauding. I mean, they were like, wow, this is so cool. You know, this is really great. So that's, you know, we have to touch people.
Is your perspective unique to you?
I think it has been fairly unique, but I think it's starting to change, and I think people are starting, you know, other musicians and conductors are starting to realize it's not going to serve us well if we are a museum piece. Like, you know, let's say, I mean, you can almost say the way it has been sometimes is the orchestra is a painting that emits sound. So we're going to go and observe this painting and hear this sound. I don't want it to be like that. I want it to be like, we're in this together. We need you. We don't want to be separated from you by some, imaginary wall. We don't want you to observe us. We want you to take part in this program in some way. So I encourage the involvement. We don't want you to have these rules and feel uncomfortable about being in the room. We want you to come in and just observe, enjoy, participate in this incredible experience. So, and I think, there are more examples of conductors who are doing interesting things and maybe talking. Oh my God, you mean I'm going to talk to somebody between pieces? Wow. Why is that so crazy? That's a great thing. Tell me something about the music that is very interesting, And I think some new iconic conductors like Dudamel and some other people are really breaking down the barriers because they understand. They understand. I understood it right from the beginning. And it's actually why I wanted to get into this music with orchestras, was to break that stuff down, to make the orchestra as relevant as I could, exciting and interesting. I love writing and hearing my music played by orchestras. That's a personal thrill. But I also think the vehicle was in trouble. And I wanted to break down the kinds of impediments that kept it from being accessible to people. And that's been my whole career. And, I feel good about what I've done in Rochester and the other orchestras where I have a position, because I've been able to do that there and set an example that, maybe some people are going to follow. I don't know. We'll see. History will tell that. I don't know.
Tell me more about the trouble. What was happening that inspired you?
Well, I came to, early on in Rochester, I came to some Pops concerts. And I just thought they were really dumb. And I left at intermission most of the time. I just didn't like, it was kind of, they were sort of corny, if that's a word, and I thought they could be so much more. And so the way I got my job was I basically, went into the office and said, look, I think these concerts could be a lot better. I think I could do a good job. And they decided to give me a shot. And I proved what I said. I proved that they could be, and that there was a way to engage the audience and to make the music, to make popular music on the Pop series have as much meaning for that crowd as the classical masterworks have on that series for that crowd. You know what I'm saying? Let's elevate the Pops to its highest possible level. And that might be something as simple as playing a Ray Charles song, that's really, really good. So we don't have to go out and try to find a Beethoven that works on the pop side. There's so much great music out there. There's of all kinds, Latin music, Motown, R&B, soul, blues, Broadway. There's so much great music out there. Let's just make it compelling and make it really worth something. So that's the goal. Let's make this as compelling and at the highest level possible. And was my motivation to do that, because I realized there are a lot of people in the world who would like to hear a symphony orchestra, but they don't want to hear Bach and Mozart and Beethoven. They don't want to hear that music. That's not for them. But they still want to hear the sound of a symphony orchestra. Let's get them in the room then. Let's give them something that makes them feel good. It could be film music. It could be Casablanca. It could be music from Jaws by John Williams. It could be, Broadway. It could be Rent. It could be all different kinds of that. It could be Latin music. It could be Brazilian music. It can be jazz. It can be blues. It could be R&B. It could be Motown. It could be even rap music. Some of that makes its way to the stage. So if it has intrinsic value, let's put that on stage too for all those people. That's kind of was my mission. And I think I've been pretty successful at doing that. And actually, if I could say, I'm proud of it. I'm proud that I was able to take it this far and accomplish what were my early goals, to bring more and more people into the hall to hear a great symphony orchestra. It's that simple.
I just took your description, and correct me if I'm off base, that you see your work as sort of tools to create an experience.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Absolutely.
And those tools can be used to, it can take just about any form. Are there forms that have been difficult to work with, more difficult than others?
Well, newer pop music is a little difficult to work with because it just boils down to a simple rhythmic pattern with a few effects going, and the people, who are kind of rapping over the top of it. There are just these little tiny elements that come in here and there. It's more about sort of what is the message, the social message of what's coming through the lyrics and whatever. And that music doesn't really work well for orchestra. It just doesn't, because the instrumentation doesn't really support it. So, and there's certain other pop music that it's very difficult. After you get past mid 2000s, it's kind of difficult to find stuff that works well for an orchestra. But if you go back, I mean, obviously anything from, and we're talking popular music now. When I say popular, I'm going back to the early 1900s with blues and ragtime, all the way through the 30s swing and the 40s swing, and then the 50s, all the soul music in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. It's all those decades are rich with music that work well for symphony orchestra. Now we're getting into an area where there's less music that will work and be compelling with orchestra. It's compelling with the groups who do it, and it's compelling with the bands that do it, but there's not enough there to have the orchestra make it interesting, if that makes any sense. So I don't know that we may have reached the pinnacle in terms of time periods of the kind of music that will work with a symphony orchestra, and maybe that'll make a change, because it always does, And it's interesting, Seal did an album of ballads, and so did I'm blanking on this other guy, but Queen Latifah, she did an album of ballads. It was really incredible, Just one other singer I can't think of who did it, and Sting does orchestra concerts. His music really works well with orchestra. So it'll be interesting to see if we're going to have emerging artists that go maybe a little counter to some of the pop music that's happening, and the music gets a little more lyrical, melodic, and has more of a form that is interesting than sort of what's happening in some of the music. And I'm not saying what's happening in the music of today is not valid, but it's valid in other ways than the complexity of the actual musical part, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, so it's, some of that music is just not going to work.
To your point, I know there's been different analyses and criticisms over the last 20 years or so that have pointed to actually like the same producers and the same beats being used repeatedly, and in how many ways that modern pop music it's simpler, it's just not as complex, and more repetitive as well. I've seen various reports on those things over the last couple decades.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in the 80s, I was an R&B artist. I had 2 albums on Capitol, 2 on Polydor, and it was crossover jazz with an R&B thing. So I hear drum beats. I'll hear a drum beat come up, and I'm like, I did that drum beat in 1980. There's nothing new there, I can tell you that. Okay, we did that in 1980. There's nothing special going on there, and these things that just vamp and vamp and vamp and vamp, and it's the same like 4 bars over and over again. It's like, honestly, I can't listen to it because it just drives me nuts. It's just because I go, the social message, I'm honestly, it doesn't register, I appreciate it. It doesn't resonate with me as much as the music because my ears are tuned to music.
Mm-hmm.
So I focus on the music. As a matter of fact, I just did what's been interesting when I created 3 different Motown type concerts. One was Queens of Soul, one was Kings of Soul, and one's called Dancing in the Street, which we're doing in Rochester next week. And then I did an 80s concert. And I always loved the music, but I didn't know all the lyrics to all the songs. I mean, we'd be in the car and my wife would be singing and she's singing every lyric. I'm like, how do you do that? She goes, well, I know all the lyrics. Well, I didn't. So when I created the music and the arrangements, and then I had to write the vocal parts out and write out the lyrics and type out the lyrics blew my mind. I didn't realize how incredible the lyrics for some of these songs really were. Some of it is incredible. Like These Dreams by the group Heart. If you ever look at the lyrics to that, they're just incredible. It's a beautiful poetic story that people are telling. So the lyrics are really incredibly important, and but I didn't realize it because I was so focused on the music. So that tends to be my tendency. And if I hear new pop music, I focus on the music and then it drives me absolutely crazy because it just repeats the same thing like 60 times, basically, Mm-hmm. So it's not, I don't even consider it music, to be honest with you. I think it's a new form of communication that uses music and effects, but also social commentary to talk about the world that we live in from the perspective of the people who write the music. And that's what it is to me. It's more theater in a sense. It's sort of audio theater more than it is music. I mean, that's how I view it. And that's how somebody who works with everything from from the 1500s to now, and every from Gabrielli and the canzonas of the, 15th century up through Beethoven and everybody to Duke Ellington and when I lump it all in one thing, and what's happening today is part of that is the smallest sort of musical part of musical history because of, again, what I said. Music is a part of something that is a social commentary, and it's theater, and it's not just about music, even though you can move and dance to it and all that. It's got a whole different, I think, purpose in the world than just listening to music. It's beyond that. It's transcended that in a way. It's a commentary on the world.
And to your point, in both pop and hip hop, and it's spreading into other genres as well, sampling has sort of taken over. Yeah. So you are seeing, whether it's beats from decades ago, sort of remixed and twisted and repeated over and over again. I was one example, my namesake, James Brown, one of his tracks, I believe, from the Big Payback. I believe I recall reading that it's been used in roughly 500 pop songs.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, what ended up happening, when I was recording, you'd get a 2 or 3 album deal, and they would sort of work your career through the albums, and you hopefully, you would make, you'd have a chance at least to be out there for a couple of years. And then it went down to you 1 album deal. Then it went down to you got a single, And now I think the people who control, the financial part of this whole industry, basically they're going to go with the producers who are putting stuff out there that's selling, and they're going to go with that until it's not selling as much, and some other guy comes out with another idea, and then they're going to go with that person, and they're going to do that until that's it's all about the money, basically, is what it is. It's all about the money. And so you're not getting a real diversity in the style of music or the content. Basically, you're just, hey, if this sells, let's do 10 more of it because it's selling. Basically, that's kind of what's going on. So, and I don't know that I could really speak to it much more than that because, honestly, I'm not in that. I don't do that music. I just observe it from, a technical music standpoint. And I'm not in any way saying it's valid or it's not valid. I'm not judging it either way. It just is.
Sure.
And I'm just sort of, assessing it as for what it is, how it appears to me. But, I'm not, so again, I'm not saying it's not great music. It's just not music that works for the world that I live in and that I'm able to bring to the concert stage.
Yeah, it's an eye of the beholder kind of situation, right?
Yeah, sure is. Yeah.
Just I know I said to keep you to an hour. I have a million more questions, but I'll keep it short.
Right.
Is there a song or popular song or artist whose music you'd like to use or tried to use and it just didn't work? Something that you wanted to use.
Well, I want to do a whole concert of Stevie Wonder's music, but we can't get the rights to it, and Stevie has to be involved in every single note. And I've been trying to do this for 5 or 6 years. It's a very complicated process, because I think people would just love a whole concert of Stevie Wonder music. But the people, everybody owns this, and I mean it's so complicated, and it all comes down to Stevie sitting in a room and deciding what he's going to allow people to do with his music. So there's nothing that I've wanted to do, say technically, artistically, that I couldn't figure out how to do, or whether it will or will not work. And I'll give you an example. Shayna Steele, who's coming here in the Motown this week, next year we're gonna do a one-woman concert with her, of her band, her music, mixed in with, there's some Ray Charles and Ella Fitzgerald and different things, and Big Mama Thornton, and different kinds of music on there. But she's also has some original things, and she sent me things to listen to. And there's a couple of her pieces which I love. I really love them. But the way she has recorded it, it's so exciting. The band is so exciting. The sound is exciting. It's so kinetic. There's all this stuff going on. And I can't figure out one thing a symphony orchestra could do on that music. So it's really better if they do it as a band-only tune, because all we could do is ruin it, basically.
Wow.
So there are times like where I am specifically not going to do something if I don't think it really can work. It has to be able to work, and I know after all this time, basically 45 years now, or maybe 50 years, I know it's going to work with an orchestra, and I know it isn't going to work, and I'm not just going to force something to work that I think can't, because it's not going to be good for anybody. The players aren't going to enjoy it. The audience is not going to enjoy it. It's just not, So I at least, I have the experience and wisdom to know what will and won't work. So,
is it after practice? Is it just listening to the music, or is it after trying to compose it that when it works?
It's 50 years of doing arrangements, seeing what worked, what didn't work, standing in front of an orchestra, hearing how they play live without any, amplification, knowing what an instrument can do, what it can't do, and then also having spent, 5,000 to 7,000 hours in the recording studio doing pop music and different things, and knowing that side of things too, and the kind of energy that generates, and so it's just knowing all of this information and processing that to say, okay, I just know there's no way this is going to work. Maybe somebody else will do it, but from what I know and all the experience I've gained in the last 50 years, I can tell you there is no possible way I can make this work. And I defy someone else to do it, without doing something totally stupid. I mean, if there's a track that's going on, it's a high energy track, the drums are cooking, the guitars are playing, it's also, they got kind of the power guitar stuff going on, the keyboards, and the singer's wailing, and it's taken up all the space, all the sound space is taken up already. Could I have the orchestra play? Yeah, we could be behind it, you know, playing big sound and long notes and fattening things, but it's not going to make any difference, and it's not going to be fun, and it's not going to be anything that's interesting. So why? But the only thing it can do is wreck the song. So why do it? You know, you could do it, but why? It's just not. It doesn't make it. You know. And on the other hand, there have been a few instances where initially I looked at something and I thought, this could work, but it's going to be really difficult to get it just right. And then I start to work with it and I realize, okay, this doesn't need, 10 woodwinds. It only needs this one solo, and it doesn't need this. It only, so then I'll pare down the instrumentation to really make it work well, and not ruin it. And I've done that in whole concerts. I mean, I took, I have an 80s concert, and in there is, there's music, there's These Dreams by Heart and Time After Time, Cyndi Lauper and Betty Davis Eyes. And I found a way to make the orchestra relevant on all of those pieces. And people who have come to hear the concert have said to me, I never imagined I would like this, that it could work, but I think it's better than the original, So it's just kind of the approach. So there were enough elements in those songs to where I could make it work symphonically without ruining it, but just enhance it, So like I said, it's one of those things that you just, experience, and time and a whole career takes you to a point where your instincts kick in and you just sort of know what can happen.
Is there a composition where your instincts have been wrong?
There have been things that didn't work originally that I've ended up rewriting like 3 times to get it right.
Such as?
Well, I wrote a jazz Nutcracker suite. Ellington also did one, but there was one movement I thought it was going to be cool, and then we did it one holiday concert with RPO, and it was like, it was okay. And then I redid part of it, and came back the next year, and it was a little better. And then I really thought about it, and I realized I had too much going on in certain sections, so I completely redid the whole thing, and I finally got it. It took me 3 times in 3 years, but I finally got it. So, and I think there have been a couple of things over the years that I've brought in with the orchestra, and they worked, but I wasn't thrilled with how it came out, and I just withdrew them, and they're in a closet and probably shredded by now. They'll never be out again. So, I would say my failure rate is probably 1%.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying everything is God's gift to music, but my success rate is pretty high. Only because of all the things I've learned. It's not about whether I'm great or good. It's just that the experience of knowing what worked and how to craft things, you just can't beat 50 years of experience. I don't care who you are. You have to live to get the experience that you need to create great stuff.
On that note, any famous last words?
Life has exceeded my expectations. I've gotten to work with some of the greatest musicians in the world, of a lot of different generations, from Leslie Odom back to Joe Williams, one of the great jazz singers of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and Tony Bennett. I mean, I've gotten to work with such incredible artists. I have gotten to work with some of the best orchestras on planet Earth. I've got to meet some incredible people through my work, presidents, all different kinds of people who have just come down to the one level of like, wow, we love the music. I mean, to get to that, they have a conversation with Gerald Ford and they have him say how much he loved the music. I mean, it's like, so I've had incredible opportunities. I've had a great career, and I'm just very thankful that whatever, being in the right place at the right time, luck, whatever. I mean, however it all worked out, I'm one of the most fortunate people on planet Earth, in my opinion. And like I said, life has exceeded my expectations. And I got to talk with you for about an hour and 10 minutes, so everything's good.
Jeff, thank you for joining me, and I'd love to have you back.
Anytime. Yeah, let's check back when I'm 72.
Awesome.